The ocean is vast, and the potential for countries to benefit from its energy is immense. Ocean energy contributes to the world's sustainable development as it reduces dependence on fossil fuels and mitigates the negative impacts of climate change while creating new jobs. A source of energy essential for the economic development, sustainability, and quality of life. It can supply electricity, drinking water, and other products, and is a great opportunity for islands and many countries that rely on oil imports for electricity generation. This is still a nascent industry. Installation and operation in an open sea environment pose significant challenges to the sector. Therefore, through international collaboration, good progress is being made to ensure that ocean energy becomes competitive with other alternative energy sources. The OES, a technology collaboration program of the International Energy Agency, presents a common approach that encourages the development of the sector, seeking a significant improvement of economic and environmental outcomes. And it invites all: governments, agencies, researchers, knowledge centres, companies and individuals to engage in strategic research and innovation activities, formulating supportive policies for the development and deployment of large-scale ocean energy systems, making it a cost-effective and reliable low-carbon source of energy generation for the whole world.
Well, you are on the attendee mode. So, well, you can see the other attendees. You have a menu like this one on the left of the screen. So you can raise your hand and take polls. We don't have it today, but well, it's an option. You can ask questions. You have an option named Ask Questions. It's like a chat, so you feel free to tap the question because the speakers will answer you. You are muted during the session, and well, as I already say, you're in listen mode. So this session is supposed to last for 45 minutes, and now I will give the virtual floor to Jonathan. So Jonathan.
Thank you, Carolina. I'll just prepare to share my screen.
Yes, of course. Please feel free to share your presentation. I think you can do it now.
There you go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining this webinar this afternoon to discuss the document that's recently been published by OES, and hopefully you've got a chance to see the OES video just now. The document that's been published recently is an evaluation and guidance framework for ocean energy technology. And as Carolina says, we have about 45 minutes for this webinar. We're going to take maybe the first half of that to give you a short presentation on the content of the framework. And then we're going to use the rest of the session to have a panel discussion. And we hope that's really just the start of the discussion around this around this document, as we'd like to get feedback from many funders around the world and many developers on how the recommendations in this framework can be uptaken in national programs and how we can all work together to improve it. So our panel today contains a great selection of national funders from around the world. We've got Matthijs Soede from the European Commission, who's going to be chairing the panel discussion. We have Ruedy from the US Department of Energy, Tim Hurst from Wave Energy Scotland, Patricia Comiskey from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and myself. So
Jonathan, sorry to interrupt. Before you continue, can I ask you to put the presentation in presentation mode, please?
Okay, hang on.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a great panel and we'll look forward to the discussion in the second half of the webinar. I'll just talk you through the content of the various parts of the webinar. We'll start off with an introduction to the framework. So I'll explain some background, the objectives and benefits that we think this framework provides, the route that we've gone through to gaining consensus on the content of the framework. I'll talk to you about the scope of the content and also the detail. Even though I say detail, we'll remain quite high level, as this really is a document that needs to be thoroughly read, and we'll try to explain the intent of that content. Then Lauren will talk about the different perspectives of different users, primarily national funders and technology developers, and how those two perspectives meet in the middle. Then Tim Hurst is going to give some examples of application. First of all, Wave Energy Scotland as an early example of a stage-gated technology development program. And then the new program in Europe called Europe Wave for development of wave energy technology, and how the recommendations from this ocean energy framework have been or are being implemented in that development. And then we'll have the discussion panel, primarily looking at public funders' perspectives, how the recommendations relate to existing programs and how we can implement them further. So that's how we're going to go through the webinar. I'll start off with a bit of background. So this document originates from a piece of work launched and driven by the OES group of the International Energy Agency called Task 12, which had the objectives of developing consensus on a set of metrics that could be used in stage gate programs for developing technologies in ocean energy. And the intent of that was to support decision making around the world, to guide appropriate and robust activities so that everybody ensured that they were taking a sensible path through the development process. And by doing that, share knowledge, promote collaboration, and above all, build international consensus so that everybody's agreeing on the same approach to technology development and evaluation. And it's really that international consensus that brings a lot of the benefits. And those benefits are primarily clarity on stakeholder expectations, so that funders, technology developers, governments all have an understanding of what they can expect from each other. And that helps with efficient decision making. We all want to get to commercialization in the ocean energy sector, and making sure that funding goes to the technologies with the highest chances of commercial success is a great way to do that, avoiding reusing funding or repeating funding. We would really like the technology development process to be consistent across the world, and that brings, again, more international collaboration, more globally transferable technology, and this concept that I think Lauren will speak more about, of a technology passport, where people understand where a technology has come from, how it's been developed, and what next steps it's ready for. International consensus is a really important part of this Task 12 activity, and it started its life quite a few years ago in 2016, when we first ran a workshop to investigate the right metrics and the right areas of evaluation that were important for the wave and tidal sectors. And that was a workshop run alongside the International Conference on Ocean Energy in 2016. Since then, we've run a series of workshops and a series of webinars to gather stakeholder input, share information, and build that collaboration to add detail to the concept of metrics for ocean energy, and to build consensus. And that took us to the point where Task 12 was launched by the OES group. And since then, in 2019, we've written a series of drafts of this report, each of which have been reviewed by the members of OES, but as equally important, they would then spread that document around various nations to get technical input from as many peers as possible. So through a series of iterations, we added detail, and we built consensus among as many countries as possible, and that led to the publication of the framework just in the last month or so. So it's been quite a long path, and this is obviously not the end of it. We're very keen to get feedback on the document, on how the recommendations are valuable, how they can be used, and how we can improve the document. So the scope of the document. The current version is aimed at grid scale electricity generation and the technology needed to deliver to that market. Although we believe that the recommendations in the report are much more widely applicable than that. Perhaps just with some small adaptations, it can be applicable to alternative markets such as community scale energy, aquaculture, desalination, and all of those other blue economy markets. So wider value than its current iteration. One of the most important things is that it covers the whole development process from concept creation right through to commercial readiness and TRL 1 to 9, and develops a series of stages that can be used in place of or alongside TRLs to give real clarity on what those different stages of the technology development process mean. And also importantly, for the types of funding program that we're talking about, it's valid for subsystems such as power takeoff units, devices, wave energy converters and tidal energy converters, and also arrays. So we've tried to cover that full range of development activities in the sector. So here we look at the actual content of the evaluation and guidance framework, and it has these 4 parts, or 4 key areas within the document. The first one being stages. We've set out a stage-gated framework with stages 0 to 5, which align very well with the document 62600-103 from the International Electrotechnical Committee, the IEC, with the addition of concept creation in stage 0. So we go through concept creation, concept development, design optimization, scale demonstration, then commercial scale, single devices, and commercial scale commercial scale arrays. And what we add to that series of stages is very detailed information on what engineering activities we think should be carried out in each stage. And so for each of the stages in the bottom left, you can see, you won't be able to read it perhaps, but you can see that for each stage you have a series of stage activities that provide real clarity to not only to the funders who budget for the cost of a program, but also the technology developers who are looking to deliver projects into those funding programs. In the top right is one of the other key parts of the evaluation framework, is the evaluation areas. And these are the 9 areas that we believe are extremely important for a thorough evaluation of an ocean energy technology. That list of evaluation areas was agreed in an iterative process through all of the workshops and through development of the document itself. So things like affordability being the highest level of effectively a hierarchy of evaluation areas, and then other things like how well does that technology perform in power capture, power conversion, and some of the other key areas like reliability and survivability, which ocean energy technology obviously needs to achieve significant performance in to be able to deliver affordable ocean energy electricity in the form of levelized cost of energy. So within each of the evaluation areas, you have a set of stage activities, and then for each evaluation area, you have a set of evaluation criteria. So whereas the evaluation area is the type of performance that you want the technology to deliver in, the evaluation criteria is exactly what parameter should a funder expect to be able to see information for, and what units and what format should they be provided in. Now this is the detail of the evaluation framework, and this is also the point where it starts to interface with all of the other really valuable documents that already exist in the sector or in production, things like technical specifications and also standards documents from the standards institutions. If you like, the content on this page of the framework tell you what should be done through a development process, what activities, what evaluations, what information should be provided, and then that sits alongside the technical specifications that tell you how that information should be calculated, how the test should be carried out, for example, and the real technical detail of how it should be done. And that's an interface between this document and this together, and then we'll be really keen to discuss how that benefits international programs and technology development processes. I'll now pass on to Lauren, who's going to talk about the use of this framework from the perspective of funders and technology developers. I'll just move on the slide now, Lauren.
Great. Thanks so much, John. Oh, I think we went one too far, maybe. Perfect. Great. So thank you again, Jonathan. Again, my name is Lauren Ruedy. I'm a Marine Energy Technology Manager at the U.S. Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office. WPTO has two programs for those who may not be familiar. We work in both hydropower and marine energy, and our office funds research, development, system performance validation, and demonstration in those areas. So as Jonathan just described, the report from Task 12 on performance metrics is a framework intended for use by multiple audiences. So it's intended to be useful for both developers as well as funders. So I also want to reiterate the point that Jonathan just made, that the metrics and approach in this report is not intended to replace or duplicate the ongoing development of standards and certification processes, but rather complement them. And I think we'll continue to talk more about that during the course of this webinar. So during the recent webinar, though, hosted by ETIP Ocean discussing standards and certification, one of the points I heard made was how IECRE aims to reduce rework, recognizing test reports from other test labs. And I'll also offer that the metrics identified in this report targets a similar objective by clarifying expectations. So if you see on the slide, again, the document is intended for use by developers and funders. So starting at the left side with the opportunity development, for a developer, we see that the framework provides clarity on stage as well as expectations. So as Jonathan explained on the previous slide, if an opportunity is requesting proposals for stage 1, a developer or an applicant can clearly identify what that means. And for the funder, the report serves as an available reference to incorporate into the opportunity as aligned with the stages and evaluation areas identified. And then moving into development and evaluation of proposals and technology at the center of the slide. Again, for a developer, this framework should reduce rework from planning processes and ambiguity on data requirements. And for the funder, the evaluation criteria identified in the report really can be leveraged to complete assessments. So again, as Jonathan laid out, there are evaluation criteria identified for each area. And for an opportunity focusing on reliability, for example, you'll see in the report mean time to failure and failure rate identified as the criteria. And for stage 1 applicants, what activities are expected to be completed. And then finally, moving and progressing on to the outcome. So as Jonathan mentioned earlier, this technology passport concept. So for both the developer as well as the funder, by using the metrics framework laid out in this report, it really contributes to the goal of moving towards increased consistency in assessment resulting from this technology passport concept. And then the last point I'll bring up before handing it over to Tim Hurst at Wave Energy Scotland is that given the context and discussion provided during today's webinar, I'd really like to remind you that, again, this is the first public release of this report. So after you've reviewed it and started to use it, I think we'd all love to get feedback. So, just to note, if you have looked at the report and haven't seen it yet, that all the way at the end, Jonathan has graciously offered to list his email. So if you have any feedback, please be sure to send it his way for further discussion. And with that, Jonathan, I think we can move over to Tim.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. That's great. Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about Wave Energy Scotland before I move on to Europe Wave. Wave Energy Scotland was created as a response to a number of technical failures in the wave energy sector of projects that were funded by the public procurer, often caused by developers not fully understanding the risks in their program, developing technology too quickly, putting large-scale devices in the water, not understanding the full level of risk. So we wanted to create something that would allow us as public procurers, that were people that were funding technology development, to have better visibility of what individual technology companies were doing, and for us to understand the risks within a program. So the program we developed, which is shown on that diagram at the bottom on the right, the stage gate development, set out how we wanted to do it. We wanted to direct each of the activities that a developer must carry out in each stage, and then test to see whether they've done it. And that way we could understand the risk, we could control the risk, and we could test the innovative features of a device at an early stage, rather than finding out they didn't work once we built a full-scale prototype. Find out the risks, push them out of the program as early as possible, keep the cost down, and effectively reduce the time for development, because you're doing things at the right point. We link that to a pre-commercial procurement model to fund the program, which is the diagram on the left. That shows how commercial procurement works. It's a process by which a public procurer that wants a piece of technology that isn't available in the market can go out to a number of providers, fund them to produce potential solutions, select the best ones, do some more development work, prototype development to say, then select the best again, and slowly reduce the number of technologies until you get 2 final technologies that provide the technology that you need. So we combine those together, and that gave us the WES stage gated process. Task 12 has effectively taken some of that and added more to it. It's gone beyond the stages that WES covered, and it's added more detail and I think some better selection criteria to allow that framework to be put together. So moving on to Europe Wave, you can jump across to the next slide, Jonathan. I'm not seeing it change here. Oh, there we go. So we're now embarking on Europe Wave, which is a pre-commercial procurement wave technology development program, very similar to WES, but this time we're doing it with partners, the Basque Energy Agency and Ocean Energy Europe. We have 3 stages in our technology development, exactly the same as we had at WES because of the pre-commercial procurement. But now what we're going to do is we're going to select activities and their associated selection criteria from Task 12 to populate our technology program. We might not be able to cover all of them because of different particular timescales and costs, but Task 12 now gives us this framework that allows us to quickly put together a technology program, add in selection criteria, and rapidly get a framework that works for us, a program that works for us, but it also is internationally recognized. We're using the same language that other people will be using. We're using the same language and the same criteria that's in Task 12. And it's allowing us to develop a comprehensive program that doesn't miss anything. We don't have to worry about whether have we thought it through, have we got all the different criteria right, have we got all the metrics right. That work has been done, and we can select the ones we want. So I think it provides an excellent framework for any public procurer who is looking to develop a program, or any private sector organization that wants to fund technology development in this area. It allows a much greater level of understanding by the public procurer, because we don't have to learn all this all over again. It's already been done. And it allows us to ask the right questions of our technology developers to avoid them from perhaps hiding a little bit of risk that we that they perhaps wouldn't tell us about. So I think it's an excellent framework. And our experience in WES is having run 5 PCP programs for 5 years. We've run 95 individual stage gate projects, and out of 95, only one of them has failed to complete. So I think that's a particularly good record, and that is down to the structure and the process that we've adopted. Okay, I think that's everything I need to say, and I'm quite happy to answer questions about any of that in the panel session later on. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Patricia next from SEAI. No, I'm not.
No, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for your presentation. But I think we're going already to the panel. But Patricia Comiskey is part of the panel, and okay, maybe I would like to ask all the presenters to switch on the camera so that everybody can see them. I would like to invite all the attendees of this webinar to put your questions. Let's see if we have enough time to get through it, but otherwise we can come back later on. But first of all, the report itself, you can find it on the website from the IEA OES, Ocean Energy Systems. You can start with Googling and pretty sure that you will find it. And I would really like to invite you to have a look and to read. And I've seen much more interesting diagrams and indeed overviews than was given already in this presentation. And I would like to thank Jonathan Hodges a lot, because he has put a lot of work in this metrics, and especially him, and to push it forward. First, maybe Patricia, you have been listening to the speakers. Any observations that you say, hey, this is interesting for us? You are part of a public funding organization, and it's one of the target groups. How do you think you can use it?
Yeah, thanks, Matthijs, and thanks to Jonathan and Lauren and Tim for all the work done already. My name is Patricia Comiskey. I work in the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, which is one of the key authorities in progressing renewable energy in Ireland. And we would fund a number of projects. We are also involved in a number of European projects where we look at the funding of projects across Europe. And where we've found this particularly useful is in streamlining information. And one of the projects that we are leading on, a European project called OceanSet, we're gathering information from right across Europe and from a number of countries on how they're funding projects for wave and tidal stream in particular. And what we've been lucky because Wave Energy Scotland are a partner on that project, so we were able to use or start to use some of these metrics and these descriptions as part of our analysis of metrics to gather the information and to try and ensure that we're getting consistent information from each of the member states. So from that perspective, we've been able to start to utilize some of this information already. And what we found was it allowed us to provide a kind of a baseline right across the different member states to compare projects and the stages that the different projects are at. So that's been really useful for us to use even already. As a funder, we have announced a call just earlier this month, and again we referenced this piece of work as a piece for applicants to consider to help describe, again, the stage that their technology is at. So it will help us in doing some of the analysis for an evaluation for the projects when they are submitted. So I think from our perspective, it's a really useful tool because it allows us to set a bar for comparison across projects and also, across different funders as well. So from that perspective, we found it really, really useful. And I suppose what we'd like to do is, as part of the OceanSet project, is to disseminate the piece of work across Europe, and to normalize it, or to socialize it, I suppose, amongst the different funders across Europe, and maybe explore that with you on how we could do that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Patricia. You're saying already that you're trying to include it in your work. I know it's not that easy. I'm working in the European Commission. We have our own funding program, and we have our own TRL-based system. And we are not talking about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but how do I have to see this? Because look, ocean energy is this very, maybe small technology area when you compare with IT, manufacturing, all these other things, and they will not all the sectors use this. Maybe Jonathan, you can jump in because you have been explaining these different phases. How can I see it with different, readiness levels? Let's say it like that. I know that you have a nice slide. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real reasons for starting this piece of work in the first place, was some of the challenges that funders and technology developers are having with using the TRL stages, with the TRL technology readiness levels, because there's so much interpretation there on what technology readiness level you are at. And what technology readiness level you would like to be at to access the funding schemes that are available. So extra detail in exactly what has to have been done in order to achieve a stage, and therefore align yourself with a funding scheme that is applicable to that stage, is a real value. And I'll just move on this slide. We started to have a think of how does this framework that we've created align with what exists already, to be able to say, okay, how much alignment do we already have with existing frameworks and schemes? So this slide shows the task 12 framework recommendations with the 5-6 stages that I explained earlier. We made a kind of a loose alignment with TRLs because that's the kind of the explanation that everybody always uses to this point, and everyone understands that to some extent. And then we said, okay, how does this compare with what the IEC says? And we made sure that our stages align with the recommendations of the technical specification 62600-103. So we've got good alignment there. Obviously, Tim said that Wave Energy Scotland was a really good example of a stage-gated program in the first place. So that covered some of the technology development process, but there's real value in expanding it either side of that so that you can see where a technology's come from and where it needs to go to next. And I think perhaps an extension to that, the bit Tim was just saying about Europe Wave, is that these stages and all the stage activities give really good clarity on what should be expected to make sure you very thoroughly develop your technology and you have a robust process. But you've got to match that up against what funding you've got available to pay for those projects. So you can't just say, right, I'm gonna have a stage 3 project and I'm gonna do everything in there, unless you've got funding to do that. So sometimes there's gonna have to be some flexibility on my funding program covers stage 1, stage 2, and the first half of stage 3. But everybody then will be able to understand what information needs to be provided out of that, so they can say, this is what's left, this is what hasn't been done. And future projects and future funders will be able to see that and see which bits have been missed out and still need to be fitted in. So I think
great. Yeah. I'm going to Lauren because you were saying as well you have me looking as well to this webinar on standardization. Was it you? Yeah. And I think it was an excellent. How is it balancing with the work here? And you were saying something about the technology passport, and how should that look like? Because you're saying, hey, test reports, is that a kind of, look, I have my passport here, but now as a developer, how is that passport from with the stage gate metrics? How would that look like?
So first, Matthijs, I'm surprised given the COVID environment we're all in that you still have your passport at the ready. So I think that's very impressive. But to address your question, no, I think that's spot on with what ETIP Ocean, that webinar was describing about standards and certification, and it particularly resonated with me what Jonathan was describing, talking about sort of how metrics and the framework that's been laid out here is really complementing and going hand in hand with the standards and certification and these metrics. So sort of addressing consistent approach to both the how and the what of system design, right? So I think that technology passport concept really comes in with leveraging the common language and expectations for technologies that have completed specific activities, because again, while the TRL scale is a useful tool to maybe describe and orient different people in different countries that have had different backgrounds and experiences, to have a loose idea of where technology might be. Even within the TRL scale, there's differences in how it's characterized. There's multiple different versions. So I think the stages really get to the heart of what maybe the intent with TRL is, and really address through those stages and the metrics, addressing that how and the what. So that's the connection that I see.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, but then I have a passport, and in my passport is said that I have already done all the work for stage 2 successfully. Yeah, because when you do stage 2 work, you can also be unsuccessful and not pass, I think, the limits or the exam. But I have managed to get stage 2, and then I'm going to Tim in this Europe wave. And can I then go quickly to stage 3 in your process of the procurement? How do you see that? I know in Wave Energy Scotland you had 5 times procurement, but you always started at stage 1. But wouldn't it be better also to start at stage 3, but with the passport?
I think in theory that works quite well. I think if somebody came from a successful stage 2 in another European project and wanted to move into a stage 3 in
only European or worldwide, China.
Well, I'm just getting to that.
From all over, huh?
I'm just getting to that. The only difficulty is that because of the funding mechanism we use, which is pre-commercial procurement, that requires you to start at stage 1. Okay. Now, if we were not using pre-commercial procurement, if we were using a grant funding process, then it would allow us to come in at any particular stage. So it all depends on how much funding you want to put into this. So we chose a pre-commercial procurement because that allows us to fund up to 100%. It's exempt from state aid rules, so you can provide R&D contracts for the full amount of the technology development. If you don't want to do that and you want to be limited by state aid and you're going to provide a grant, then you can have a grant structured program, and you could allow technology companies to switch between different funding programs. They could leave stage 1 in one and arrive and go into stage 3 in another. So absolutely it could be done, but it all depends on how you fund it. If you use PCP, everybody starts at the beginning because it's a competition, and you can't win the competition only to find someone comes in front of you in the final stage. That's fundamentally not right. But if it's a grant funded program, you could do it. And I think the passport has to be a passport that's been stamped by the right authority as well. We don't want a passport that someone's written out for themselves. If they say, well, we've reached this this selection criteria and we measured it ourselves and we've validated it ourselves, that's not good enough. We need to have some sort of third-party verification of performance or reliability or whatever it is you're putting forward. It needs to be a recognized passport office that issued your passport if we're going to follow it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but it means that there's a lot of additional work to pursue this. Huh?
There is,
So,
but I think it might be necessary, because you look at all those different stages, and there are many countries that do not have test facilities at each of those stages. So you might develop your technology in one nation state. I'm trying to say member states, and then you might need to go somewhere else for stage 4 or stage 5, because that's where the test facilities are. And I think that makes a lot of sense for a technology developer.
Yeah. Are you going to reach out to test facilities to adapt this stage gate metrics and to train on them, or what actions are needed for the future?
I think it depends on the test facilities. Some test facilities are just that, they're test facilities. Some provide verification services. Some are recognized national laboratories. So it all depends on the services that they can provide. Some can provide funding as well. So I think it depends on that, but certainly they can slot into this very easily, without a doubt.
Jonathan, maybe you can have something to add on this.
Yeah, I spoke a number of times, and Lauren spoke about engaging the certification bodies, the standards institutions, and the test sites are just another addition to that list of people who should be engaged with this process to get feedback and gain hopefully their support, but their input to how it can be improved, and the list can carry on beyond that, no doubt. And I think something just to add to the previous conversation about the technology passport is that we're kind of looking forward towards private investment as well. And I think this framework can be valuable for those people who aren't constrained in the same way with their funding mechanisms, to be able to understand where a technology's come from, what its pedigree is. And I really like the point you made a few seconds ago about the difference between TRL and stages, with not only what TRL have you achieved, but how well have you achieved it. And that's one of the really key features of this framework, is partnering those two up, saying what have you done and how well have you achieved it.
Yeah, no, thanks. Unfortunately, I don't see any questions, so I think we are very clear on what we are saying. Or it is a mystery, that could be as well, and then it's also very difficult to ask questions. What we're saying, observing, is there's still work to be done. I think it's also kind of mentality shift. Hey, what are we going to test? It's not just some piece of technology, but there are some evaluation criteria. And for myself, when I read the report, I thought, okay, that's really great to see all this. Evaluation areas well described, on power conversion, on controllability, on reliability. What are the criteria to fulfill? And I think that's really something for developers. It's for test centers, and when we have the results, it's really something on the credibility as well for funding organizations. Because I've seen projects asking for funding, and are they really credible in what they are saying? Last remark for all, what do you think is the most important step to do now? Any idea? Lauren, maybe you?
Yeah, I can offer, so I guess before I directly answer your question, one other anecdote I'd like to offer is, in the U.S., our office has independent external reviewers peer review our portfolio every 2 or 3 years, and it's a public event. And most recently, right before COVID sort of shut down in-person events, so it was late in 2019. The peer reviewers had acknowledged our increased incorporation of standards into projects like our funding opportunity announcements in recent years. And as one of my colleagues likes to point out, WPTO's supportive standards work has been one of the top, if not the top rated effort of the last couple years in peer review. So it continues to get really high marks and reception from external reviewers. And, we'd like to continue that trend, right? And one of the other pieces of feedback we got was a need to incorporate, more consistent and increase the use of metrics as part of both the project and the evaluation. So I think this framework gives us a really good place to pull from to really accomplish that objective and move in the direction of consistency. So I would say first step would be, for anyone that hasn't read the document, read the document, and then, really start implementing it and using it, because that's where you get the really, useful feedback is not, just in the reading, but in the implementation.
Jonathan, something? Oh, I see Patricia. Patricia.
Thanks, Matthijs. I agree very much with Lauren. I suppose I would see that the next stages are really to socialize this out and to test it, and to see how it works in different systems, how it supports different funders. Because my understanding with this is that it's a live document and a live process, so it is something that you are looking for feedback on. So I think, yeah. Put it out, test it, and see where we can bring in where it adds value and where there may need to be some changes. Just to note, Matthijs, there's a couple of questions coming through on the system. I do see them, but we can certainly answer them afterwards if we don't see them right now.
Okay. Carolina, is there any question? I know that we don't have that much time anymore, but Carolina, is there any important question?
Well, there's a lot of questions on the section. I don't know if you were following them.
I don't see them, unfortunately, in my panel. But what we can do is we can list them with, review them with the panel. I think we will put an announcement as well, or a short summary on the website of the IEA OES, and come back as well to the frequently asked questions. Your questions are not lost. Let me say it like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Is that possible, Caroline? I think so. Huh?
Well, yeah. We will arrange a manner and then contact the attendees and tell them how the questions will be addressed. But yeah, we have a lot of questions you have a lot of questions to answer. So I think people really enjoy the webinar. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Tim, one sentence. We have to finalize the webinar. It's already time. You like to say?
Okay, yeah. All I would say is I've used this to a certain extent in WES, and we intend to use it along with the Basque Energy Agency in Europe Wave. We think it's a very good structure and framework for developing wave energy, and we're going to fully test it, and I hope other public procurers will do the same.
Okay, keep us updated about your experiences. I think that's very important. Yeah. Jonathan, maybe your last.
Yeah, very keen to understand how public funders around the world perceive the benefits of this and how they'll implement it, hopefully, and very keen that Task 12 carries on working with the accreditation bodies and standards agencies to align and fill gaps between the framework here and all of the great documents that those institutions create.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I think we heard a lot. I think we are in the middle of a process. This was just one stage, but you will hear soon more. Please don't hesitate to share your experiences, read the document. I hope to see you as well, and maybe that we can have discussions on the document. And I really would like to thank all the attendees for listening. And it's very valuable, and also would like to thank WAVEC for the organization of this webinar. Thank you all. Have a nice day. I have to say morning, afternoon, or evening, but thank you for attending this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.